Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. I'm Rishabh Gulati. Ladies and gentlemen, there's an election on in the United States of America, and here's the odd thing. It's a statement of fact. There are more guns in America than there are people. True. Per capita, there are 120 firearms for every 100 people, which means to say that in the United States of America, 400 million firearms are accounted for, let alone how many others are estimated. India is not like that. In India, that figure I think is closer to 5 per 100. So it's the other end of the spectrum. So now let's put some images on your screens, because we have just learnt this context of when something is obviously going wrong, it starts seeming absurd. Do we need 120 guns for 100 people? We must do something about it. And even big countries, rich, prosperous, powerful countries sometimes struggle doing it. So let's have this conversation in the context of when we can see that something requires improvement in our own country. Do we have the gumption to take it on, or do we want to just avoid the controversy that will come and be trepidatious about unnerving, fluttering some feathers when it's the right thing to do? The children of this country, whether they're Hindu, they're Sikh, they're Jain or Muslim, need a better education. Our education has not been delivering the standards of skilling that we require. In order to provide a better education, we need, number one, an understanding that STEM education, which is maths and science, qualified teachers, are as important as other forms of education, which includes religious education. How do we then look at Muslim religious schools in this country, which are madrassas, seek to improve them without losing our minds about it? It's an obvious issue that requires a resolution, that it would be beneficial to the students of madrasas to have alternative science and mathematics education, to have better qualified teachers, in addition to learning as taught by the clerics the religious texts, primarily the Quran, not in replacement of earning. Now, should there be suspicion? Should there be conversation? Should there be charcha? Yes, absolutely, there should be. Let's do it. Joining us now on the broadcast to take this further, we have Major Mohammad Ali Shah is with us, Ashwini Dubey joining us, and Ahmed Ayaz joining us on the broadcast. Let me pick this up one by one. Mr. Ayaz, if you can hear me, the Supreme Court of India has now come out and said that the High Court, which came out and struck down an act brought forth by the Yogi government in Uttar Pradesh called the Madrassa Act, should actually be upheld, that the act is not unconstitutional, it's not in keeping with the secular fabric of India. What do you make of this ruling, sir? Mr. Ayaz, if you can hear me, sir. I think he's probably can't hear us. He's taking his coat off. Probably it's a bit warm. Let me try to get Ashwini ji. Ashwini ji, now in substance of what the Supreme Court has said, can you help our viewers understand what have they actually come out and said?
Rishabh ji, thank you for having me here. One simple line is that the Supreme Court says that the state has a legitimate interest in regulating educational standards within religious institutions, meaning thereby no education board, be it the religious or be it the secular or government owned or the arising from the religious scriptures, is not beyond the legitimacy which is to be fixed by the government. The Supreme Court said that regulatory measures concerning educational quality do not inherently interfere with the administration of madrasas, noting that the Act aimed to enhance the educational experience for students rather than diminish the religious instructions. Means judgment is very balanced, saying that what you teach The government may say that you have to teach this, and that has to be in standards paramount with the interest of the constitution and India, and which can bring uniformity between these students, among these students, and should not be contrary to the religious scriptures education and the board education. The constitutional validity, second question, Rishabh ji. The court held that the Madrassa Act did not violate the basic structure of the constitution as the High Court had suggested. The Supreme Court said that the law could only be invalidated for violating fundamental rights as outlined in Part 3 of the Constitution or for issues related to legislative competence. Rishabh ji, one thing that when education is to be controlled by the state, comes under the state list, then that there is no education board, be it the private, be it the religious, be it the government, beyond the ambit of the government.
So there would have been nothing. Okay. So let me quote something from the Supreme Court, and I'm quoting this from the Chief Justice. You cannot wish away several hundred years of history of this nation like this. Suppose we uphold the High Court order and the parents of the children still send them to madrasas, then it will just be a silo without any legislative intervention. Mainstreaming is the answer to ghettoization, unquote. Which is to say that we don't want ghettos to be created in this country. We want people to come out on the mainstream. But that, Ashwini Dubey, does it tackle the larger question about reform of madrasas, about offering STEM education? I spoke to, very recently, the former chief of the UP Madrassa board, and he said, when we speak of madrasa reform, what do we want? We want maths and science to be taught. We want alumni to come and visit and inspire the students. We want a basic educational qualification for teachers. This is being opposed tooth and nail. So have we come closer to madrasa reform?
Till the time those who regulate, those who define, those who select the syllabus, the method of teaching, what is to be taught, is to be looked into by in the larger perspective, keeping in view the reforms in mind, keeping in view the progressive outline to the students, keeping in mind the country's interest paramount. Of course, the judgment will not help. What is required? Required is that the syllabus which is being taught has to be fixed with the minimum standards when the other community students are getting, and that should be inequivalent to that.
Okay, so we have a very weird situation. The weird situation is that we are told that if we do intervention on an issue of triple talaq, that is interference in Muslim culture. How is that interference in Muslim culture? If we are saying that there should be a basic standard of education in madrasas other than, not in replacement of, other than, in addition to, this is where the confusion happens.
When the constitution was being framed and 389 constitution framers, they were discussing this issue whether the law derived from the parliament should be retained in the country, or the laws even existing derived from the religious scripture should also should stand. There was the debate. That is why the Article 44A was invented, that the state has a right to bring uniformity, the Uniform Civil Code, and that is why, unless and until there is the distinction, the difference between the women and women, between the men and men, between the education and education.
So for too long, for just too long, we have so muddled and fuddled this conversation that we have rendered it almost infructuous for anyone attempting social reform in this country, Hindu, Muslim alike. Let me get Ahmed Ayaz into this conversation. Ahmed Ayaz, in 2004, 20 years ago, a different government of Mulayam Singh Yadav said that there should be minimal legislative oversight of madrasas in Uttar Pradesh. For some reason, the Allahabad High Court struck it down. The Supreme Court today says, and I'm quoting, sir, mainstreaming is the answer to ghettoization. Is that to say that ghettoization was indeed been taking place?
In fact, see, there is Board Act, Madrassa Board Act in the UP, which is well recognized and approved by the government, and that's not just some autonomous body has done it. That's well approved, which got challenged by the in the High Court of Allahabad sometime back, challenging so the provisions on possibly the secularity of the board's provisions, that the board is not, the education taught in the schools in the UP is not, perhaps does not have a secular character. I mean, based on that, I think that was a reason which the people have taken it to the court, and UP court agreed to it, and they consented about the applicant, and well, and today the Supreme Court has reversed the decision, and they have upheld the board's what you call it, Madrassa Board Act in UP. And I think to that extent, had the Supreme Court said yes to the High Court, Allahabad High Court, possibly nobody could say, unless there we could say some thing needs to be put for review or asked a revision, that could be different thing. Now that Supreme Court has held it, and that's okay and very welcome. So we will not cast aspirations now as to why the court did it. And now the
Okay,
court has
all
done
right,
it.
okay. So let me ask you a basic question, because this just takes us back to status quo ante. This is not some progress that has been made. We are exactly where we were 20 years ago. There are at least 16,000 madrasas with potentially a few lakh students studying there. Now, in addition to religious education, in addition to the Quran and other aspects of religious education, should these students have the option to study science, mathematics? Should they have the option to take on other courses?
Okay, that's okay. Yes, let there be. There's no harm in that. But the question is, as on today, that the Madrassa Boards Act is well in place in the UP, which has defined and what is to be taught and what is not to be taught. Additionally, if we say there is something missing, like as you said, the science, maths, or something other than that is missing, that need to be incorporated. Well, if that is done, there is nothing harm. Let us don't limit it to the Islamic studies only. Let the madrasas be expanded, no issue. That's no harm. There's nothing wrong in that. So if there is something missing of that nature, even if that is included, I don't think nobody will object that, because after all, Muslims also will like to grow. Muslims, apart from being taught Islamic there, let the other things be taught, other subjects be taught. I don't think anybody would have objection
but that
to
would
that.
be conventional logic. But I fear a contrarian logic, and the contrarian logic is dystopian, it's disturbing, because there is no doubt that in this country, the economic upliftment is required of Muslims. Everybody agrees on this. I'm sure Muslims themselves feel that they would want to take a better part in India's economic journey to be a developed country. At the same time, when we say that education is an important part in the future economic journey, we get stuck. It almost makes me think that there are certain nefarious individuals who want this to happen, who want a lack of basic mathematical and science education taking place, and that would be dystopian, disturbing. Let me get in Major Shah. Major Shah, so we have gone around in a massive circle and gone back to the status quo ante of 20 years ago, where Mulayam Singh Yadav said, okay, minimum legislative oversight is okay for madrasas. What we haven't touched upon is, do the madrasas require reform in addition to the religious teaching, in addition to the Quran? Do they require better chemistry labs? Do they require better physics labs? Do they require mathematical education? Do they require other co-curriculum, maybe sporting activities, other kinds of things that would give students other mainstreaming opportunities?
Right, Rishabh, firstly, madrasas, in Arabic, it means a place of learning, of getting educated. So most certainly the ruling of the Supreme Court, it's welcomed. In fact, why? I'll tell you why. Let me tell you logically. See, people have a wrong misconception. They have a misconception of madrasas. Oh, they are this. No, madrasas. In fact, they have taught people like Guru Nanak. They went to a madrasa to learn Persian. In fact, in his early years, Munshi Premchand went to a madrasa. He is such a literary person. Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the first president of India, first vice president of India, went to the madrasa. In fact, we have a list of them. Now, madrasas, yes, they should actually reform. They should study English, science, maths, computers, which is the computers is the language of today. In fact, earlier, एक ज़माना था where people would say अंग्रेजी सीखनी है. Today, computers were a must because computers should be taught in madrasas. I advocate because computer doesn't discriminate. Computer does not know you are Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, or Christian, or where region, religion, which country you belong to. Computer just knows your capability. So madrasas, yes, they need to reform. And I will quote the former Vice Chancellor of Aligarh Muslim University, Lieutenant General Zedu Shah. When he was the Vice Chancellor, he inducted something known as the Bridge Course. Bridge Course was what? Bridge Course was bridging the gap between the modern education and the madrasa education. So, which means now a madrasa student could join the IAS, IPS, could join the army, could become a lawyer, a scientist, because he's well educated. He's just not just qualified for madrasas and just be on theological teachings, on religious teachings only. And apart from the Quran,
all right.
yes.
Okay, so there are going to be, Major Shah, there are going to be people who will pursue religion as a life's devotion. They will become the clerics in the future, and then that is not only their devotion, their duty, but is also their means of survival. That happens in all communities. It happens in Sikhism, it happens in Christianity, it happens in Hinduism. There are people who are priests and then derive their livelihood from their knowledge of religion. Certainly in the Muslim community that is also going to hold true. But there are 16,000 madrasas in just UP. We're talking about lakhs of students. It is not necessarily that all of them will aspire to become clerics. They require other opportunities. Now, are we in fact doing the alternative by perpetuating the only option of religious education in certain villages, denying them mainstream opportunities?
Right, Rishabh, absolutely. That's a very, very good question. See, the social reformer, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, studied in a madrasa. In fact, he abolished sati. And so what he said is very right. Not necessarily that a person who is madrasa educated will actually go for to become a cleric or go for theological studies. A person from madrasa should be capable enough, should be equipped to get a good job outside. के दीन के साथ साथ दुनियादारी के बारे में पढ़ाई करे वो. So it's very important because I remember earlier when I was a small child, there used to be a movie they would see in Hindi movies especially. You would see चिट्ठी आई है गाँव में, a master ji reading out a letter in English. Now it should be technology because, and I think technology is very a must. There's no escape from technology. Thanks to technology, we are right now, you are in the NewsX office and I'm sitting in Gurgaon and we are communicating. So basically, madrasas most certainly need reform. And most certainly, and let me tell you, the image that they have had, people say that, oh, they have, people from, I don't know what, they have been maligned. But see, Rishabh, they are good eggs and bad eggs everywhere.
Yes.
I studied in a Catholic school. You know, I went to a convent school and in St. Joseph's, and thereafter I went to Lawrence School, Lovedale, to a boarding school. So there we had a cathedral in both the schools, in fact. And it was, yes, but that doesn't mean that they taught us on theology. Yes, I would proudly go to a church. I even now proudly go to a temple. I proudly go to a gurdwara, in fact. So it is something for secular learning. And the concept that the ruling of 2004, in fact, Mulan Singh Yadav, we went to the High Court ruling. In fact, on 22nd March, the High Court ruling was now the Supreme Court given a verdict, and it's very much welcome.
Okay, it's so it cuts both ways, ladies and gentlemen. It's not as clear cut as we are looking at it, which is why there's a controversy around it. So let me get Mr. Dubey in for a last thought. Mr. Dubey, now the assumption was being drawn that this act, rather than regulate and provide a framework, actually allows for the protection and continuation of madrasas. That in fact the better thing would have been for the act to be depromulgated and mainstreaming these students into government schools and not having the madrasas. So we are now, as I mentioned, back in status quo ante. What have we just achieved in this circle? What is your take on that?
This balancing secularism and minority rights both. It's a state has a positive obligation to protect minority rights while ensuring that the educational standards are maintained, Rishabh Bhai. The Madrassa Act does not interfere with the day-to-day working of the madrasas. It is to protect the rights of minorities in the state of Uttar Pradesh, and it's consistent with the positive obligation of the state, ensuring that the student can pass out and earn a decent livelihood, number one. Number two, it should be akin to the other parameters, other educational standards, the national standards, which are being followed, as Muhammad Ali Shah had just said. That has to be here, because after completing certain educational process, when they come in the mainframe, wants to become a doctor and engineer, but since they have not got the maths education, since they have not got the science education, so they should not be allowed, they should not compete with the other students who have studied the science and maths. So that is why the national standards has to be maintained and for standardizing the educational framework.
So here's the complexity of it, and the reason it's not a straightforward argument. I'm trying to put that down in a question, but let me explain it to you as I end this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, 16,000 madrasas in UP, about 16 lakh people, okay, 16 lakh students there. 20 years ago, Mulayam Singh Yadav's government brings in this law that says that the state will set up a framework. In setting up a framework, it also thereby gives a recognition to the madrasas. Okay? The Allahabad High Court ruling, by removing the framework, potentially also de-recognize the madrasas. Now you can argue this, which is where it got stuck, that the Supreme Court, by reinstating this law, says that the framework exists. So where 10 days ago there was a confusion over what happens to the madrasas and whether the students who will actually graduate can graduate or need to be sent to government schools, that has ended. But it is not undertaken that within the framework are we actually providing science education, math education, sporting education, other education. We are back at status quo ante. A round circle has taken place. It's a very complex, very difficult argument. But what we have to draw the line on, people who want to study the Quran or who want to teach their children the Quran through the route of a madrasa, which primarily does that, should have the right to do so. Not every person who studies the Quran in the multitude of lakhs, 17, 18 lakhs, will go on to become only clerics. They might want to do other things in their lives, which will require science and maths and sports and other things. Should they also be given that opportunity? And if so, how? We'll come back and have these conversations because they're required to be had again and again before we actually do something. I thank my guests. See you in a minute.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.